The Super Bowl is the biggest event in the calendar year, and I'd like to evaluate it through that lens. It's really interesting because the Friday before the weekend at work, it was a common question every meeting that I had. Hey, are you going to watch the game? Do you have any plans for the game? It's embedded. There are people who genuinely believe that Monday should be a holiday. I'm not really here to talk about those people. I'm here to talk about everyone and why the Super Bowl is actually for everyone. This particular Super Bowl and the Super Bowls moving forward are going to be filled with tension, or were filled with tension and are going to be filled with tension. There's tension between the old and the new, nostalgia and innovation, national and global. By design, this event has gotten so big that it's really meant to pull at every single string that it possibly can. The commercials do this in aggregate. The broadcast tries to do this. In this case, that's NBC. The game tries to do this. The Super Bowl is really meant for all of us. But as a result, it doesn't really belong to any of us. And so, one underlying question is how long can they actually keep this up? As groups become more polarized and opinions get more extreme, which isn't breaking news, all of you have heard this before, people will get more and more critical about different aspects of different things and stick to a certain lane. And the Super Bowl itself is really impressive because it doesn't really try to occupy a specific lane. Throughout the broadcast, I was really impressed more just by the scale of it all and the fact that there were commercials for older generations and nostalgia, and there were commercials with celebrities that Gen Z and Gen Alpha know. Luckily, there were no memes fully integrated, but there are just so many ideologies matched in one. And that's the part that is really interesting to me. And so I want to explore that because there's this tension again, this tension that's pulling and pulling and pulling. And I'm not sure that they'll be able to keep this up. This is Specks, and I'm your host, Ian Villanueva. The production was fabulous. I like when games are actually put on NBC because I think that they always do a really, really fantastic job with it. The broadcast always looks fresh, it always looks clean, it always looks modern. I was able to watch it in 4K, and I think the picture looked fabulous. I don't really think there were many hiccups with sound or picture. I saw a couple of camera shots that weren't quite there, and I can get into those later. But ultimately, it just feels really clean and fresh. They opened up with the memory box, which I thought was a really clever way to do it. It wasn't anything groundbreaking, but the concept was that they put these memory boxes, I think, in San Francisco, even though the game was played about an hour away. And people could go into these boxes and they could record something, a memory or their feelings about the Super Bowl in general. And so you had older folks and young folks and people of all ages going in there and talking about the different ways that the game has affected them. And then you eventually interspiced some of the players who have played in past games, and they were all talking about memories, and everyone was having a great time. But really, it was supposed to hit at each person who had any kind of relationship with football. And they were really setting the stage for nostalgia. And so that's the first kind of area that I want to flag the tension that we see. You have the nostalgia of the memory box, and you have the production of NBC, which looks really modern. And because I'm not sure if it was because it was in San Francisco or if it was just because this is just how they want to do things, but there was kind of this computer chip AI theme to a lot of the graphics. So I'm not sure if, again, if that's because, it was just San Francisco and it's tech, so they just wanted to make it look techy, or if that's just something they were trying to do. And so again, there's like that contrast there, which I thought was really interesting. Don't know if that's what they wanted to express. And again, a lot of this was overlaid against shots of the Golden Gate Bridge. It's probably the most iconic, one of the two most iconic structures in the United States. Otherwise, it was generally a pretty standard broadcast. I don't think they did anything super innovative. There was a little wind graphic that I kind of liked, which honestly just looked kind of video gamey. Another thing that was interesting was they actually did the player intros at the beginning as the players were walking in the tunnel. They usually do that as the game's already started, but my hunch is that they did that because they didn't want to clutter the actual gameplay with that, or maybe it was just a production note to say, hey, like, let's not do player intros because it distracts from the actual product. So I thought that was interesting. It also kind of brings back what used to happen over a couple of decades ago. Players used to get introduced one by one as they ran out onto the field. And we kind of lost that because I think it was, funnily enough, when the Patriots played in that Super Bowl against the Rams, where they upset them, Tom Brady's first Super Bowl and Bill Belichick's first Super Bowl, the one that they won together, they made the decision to just run out as a team. And obviously, if you're a team that comes after that, there's no way you can do anything differently because it just, I think for perception, that just doesn't look great. So everyone wants to be a team. And so this was kind of a cool way to bring that back. When it came to the game itself, I would say that it felt like a very well produced, technically proficient TV show or movie. And specifically, I think it's one that you would have put on Netflix. Because in the time leading up to this, there's been a few things about Netflix series and movies and how they're designed for people who want to watch things while they're on their phone. So I think Ben Affleck had an interview recently where he said something like Netflix makes actors and kind of the story has to repeat the plot multiple times throughout the film because it's designed so that you can just watch it in the background of what your attention's really at, or with split attention. And so I think that's a really good way to put this. This game wasn't great. I think for a true football fanatic who really likes to watch defense, I mean, the Seahawks defense put on quite a show. There are also a couple of fabulous plays by Christian Gonzalez when he would just break up passes. He almost picked things off the Patriots cornerback. There were a couple of great runs by Kenneth Walker, like just really technically proficient things that I think football fans and people who really watch football would really appreciate. Even just Kenneth Walker waiting for the hole to open. I thought that was great. So there were definitely some ensemble members, but this wasn't like a star-studded event. There weren't people who came out and just exploded or blew you away. No star characters. This was also a really slow burn. I don't think that there was really any payoff here by the end of it. I think that there was just enough to keep you invested. So it's kind of like if you're watching the first season of a Netflix series and you're kind of like, okay, this is slow, but I can see it building. My eyes, I'm just going to take them off because, hey, here's another drive that ended in a punt. And that happened quite a few times. There were no touchdowns in the first half, if I'm recalling correctly. There were just enough instances, like just enough shots, like downfield, or enough plays that made you kind of get excited and make you want to stick around. This really happened towards the end, too, because it seemed like the Seahawks were going to run away, and they ultimately did run away with it. But The Patriots even scored that touchdown like later to make you think, hey, this is this is possible. This is still kind of a game. Overall, it just wasn't something that I thought was a really good product, honestly. I think if it's the type of thing that you're explaining football to someone and you wanted them to watch alongside you and they wanted to get into football, so you were excited to show them this game, this isn't something that I would have felt good about. Just something that I just didn't think was great in terms of product outside of a few key players and some key plays. Again, there were some risks taken, and I always appreciate that in football games, but just not the greatest execution. So, with that said, I think the announcers did as good of a job as they could have given how the game unfolded. And you could kind of see the game unfolding that way early on. And so Chris Collinsworth and Mike Tirico, they kind of set the stage in that way. They were really complimenting the Seahawks defense and a little bit to the Patriots defense, but really the Seahawks defense. And it was kind of like setting the stage. They were basically telling you that this was gonna be a grinded out game, because I think that was the only way to kind of tell the audience that, hey, the offense isn't executing or the offense is horrible. It's just more like this is really gonna be that kind of a game. They're always really smooth with it. I mean, they're one of the best broadcast teams in the country. It goes really clear, really excited at the right moments. Chris Collinsworth, really likable. Maybe not always the greatest insights, but really likable, really homey, with you. I enjoy it. I enjoy listening to them. They don't take away from the game. I think that they actually are a value add for the game. They're always smooth within the context of the game, but they are, honest. And I think that's a really important piece in building trust with the audience. They'll call out a bad play. Mac Jones threw an interception late in the game, and Collinsworth just said, I don't know what he was thinking. I really appreciate that. And I think anyone who watches football regularly or anyone who is even a casual fan would sort of agree and think that that was the right thing to say. I guess there's an argument to be made that they could have done more, just considering the game was not good. So maybe there's an expectation by some people who watch games that the announcers can kind of take it to the next level. But I think that would have been more important for a random Thursday night game or a Sunday afternoon game. I think the Super Bowl carries itself. And as much as the Super Bowl is about the game, or it is a game, the Super Bowl's much bigger than that. And people who aren't interested in football, people who are not even going to know who won in about a week's time, that's what this event is for. So the announcers really do become like this outside peripheral noise. So, with that said, a big part of this is obviously the commercials. I think the commercials are just as important as the game here. People look forward to that. It's always in those questionnaires. What are you most excited about? At work today, they asked, hey, of those who watched the Super Bowl, like, did any commercials stick out? I think they were par for the course. I mean, there were some commercials that were creative, but in aggregate, I think everything was pretty expected. One thing, I did watch it at home, and I did appreciate the Coinbase commercial because all they did was basically turn the screen into a karaoke screen, and they just let it be I Want It That Way by the Backstreet Boys. So I'm pretty sure the intent was that if you were out watching this at a party or whatnot, or even a bar or something, right? And then you start to see those and they're playing the music in the background, that like the whole bar would start singing or the whole room would start singing. We didn't watch this with any friends. It was just my wife and me. So we were more just like, what is this trying to do? Or what is this commercial going to be? And then they put Coinbase at the end. So I thought that was creative. A little bit of nostalgia while trying something different. And Coinbase is a crypto company, so again, I think it's just that pull, right? How do you merge the old with the new? And I think it was a really clever, simple way to do that. There was a lot of commercials that fell into the theme of nostalgia, sort of Americana. There was that one with the horse and the eagle. I think there was a Budweiser commercial. There was the Lay's potato chip commercial with the farmer and passing it down to his daughter. But then there were a lot of future commercials, both built into the commercials. Like there was clearly a lot of use of AI in these commercials, but there were also just a lot of commercials about AI companies, which I found really interesting. It's obvious that that's what's the biggest thing right now. Other than that, it had the typical big stars in commercials. I think the Dunkin' commercial with Ben Affleck, where they reimagined Goodwill Hunting as a sitcom, that was like a really great example of what a Super Bowl commercial is really all about, which is just put in a bunch of celebrities you don't see on TV in a commercial, do something very nostalgic feeling, and just be kind of funny. And hey, I think that's what most of the public wants, honestly, out of their Super Bowl commercials. One other thing is there was that Jurassic Park commercial where they obviously used AI to change some of the movie. I think it was an Xfinity commercial. That was really interesting. And it was sort of discomforting how AI yet real it looked and thinking about how real it could look in the near future. I think that's going to be something that people start to get really tense about as we go forward. And we already see it with people who push back against scripts or entertainment that is AI generated or supported or boosted by AI. So I think that there was some discomfort around that. And this is just only compounded by the fact that other people or other organizations, I should say, were advertising for AI products. Now, I really, really want to talk about halftime because I'll just be very frank. This is going to be the Bad Bunny Super Bowl. No one is going to remember this game. As cool of moments as the game had for people who like football, culturally, this will be remembered as the Bad Bunny Super Bowl. I think it was fantastic. And I'm recording this within the past, you know, 24 hours after it happened. So, you know, it's, maybe it's recency bias, who knows. But honestly, I think that this and booking Bad Bunny was the clear marker that the Super Bowl is really our biggest event because the NFL doesn't concern itself with the audience and the groups that might want a certain kind of music. The NFL is literally just saying, hey, who are the top five biggest artists in the world? Those five? Okay, let's pick that one. Let's go with Bad Bunny this year. That's what they did. So I'm really just sort of impressed with that because the NFL is sort of daring many of its constituents that and its fans to just say, okay, you can stop watching football. We're still going to put Bad Bunny on here. And this is about as strong of a political statement the organization could make without being really blunt. But again, I think it just speaks to the power of the NFL and the event itself. And even with the performance itself, I'm very impressed with the NFL's flexibility. I know that there's that partnership with Apple Music and Rock Nation, so that probably has a lot to do with it. But, I'm sure there were people who were upset by it, but He was really just showcasing, Bad Bunny was just really showcasing Puerto Rican culture, and I thought that was really cool. I think it was just really thoughtful. The camera work was incredible. The visuals were incredible. Everything about it was just fun. I'm not a huge Bad Bunny fan myself. I do like some of his songs, but I thought it was just a fantastic performance, and I think it's the most memorable thing, hands down, about the Super Bowl. And I think it will be listed as one of the better, if not one of the best, halftime shows that we've ever had at a Super Bowl, just in terms of impact and how it made people feel, especially considering how much the game was forgettable. I think that this was great. This will be that Super Bowl, the Bad Bunny Super Bowl. Maybe some football fans will talk about the Seahawks' dominance, especially on defense. They might think of it that way. I think that's going to be a very small subset of the population. But I know that I'm going to be able to talk to a random coworker in a few years and say, remember that Super Bowl with Bad Bunny? And they'll know exactly what I was talking about, and they'll remember it pretty vividly. Ultimately, though, just this wasn't just an entertaining game. Again, save for a few plays from some of the ensemble cast, I don't think it was something that was really watchable. And as I said, if I was able to bring someone along who maybe wanted to get into football, or I was trying to show them how exciting football could be, you know, a soccer fan who's just like, I don't get American football. I'm like, come watch the Super Bowl with me. I just don't think they would have walked away being super impressed with this game, and definitely wouldn't have gotten excited about it. So that leads me to my question. I don't really know how long the NFL can keep this up. As the Super Bowl gets bigger, is the NFL going to continue to lean in? They picked Kendrick Lamar last year. They picked Bad Bunny this year. Are they going to swing sort of in the other way? And without me explicitly saying it, I think you know what I'm talking about. Because the NFL, as other people have noted before me, is very traditionally coded, right? It just feels traditional. It just feels like something that's very American in the most American way. And the NFL has been successful in combining that with really forward thinking ideas. Instant replay and improving graphics. Everything is super precise. And they're really espouse the benefits of data. And it's a really interesting sort of tension there. So, how would I actually rate this game? If I was just rating the game alone, and so say this again was a Sunday afternoon game or a Thursday night game or a Monday night game, the game alone was like a 6.7. Defense can be really fun to watch when it plays well. The Seahawks had a lot of sacks. Sacks are exciting. But again, it just didn't feel like something I want to even remember. I wouldn't point to this game as an example of great football, except for a few cases. However, when you consider a score for this game, you have to consider the halftime show. You have to consider the commercials, because these are all things that are part of the Super Bowl. This isn't a weeknight or a Sunday game. This is the Super Bowl. This is something that I can reference and people will know what I'm talking about. And this is going to last in memory because of the halftime show. The production, Bad Bunny, Ricky Martin, Lady Gaga, the fact that there was a real wedding, the way that it was shot, it was beautiful. And so this really boosts it up. The commercials are the other component, which again were passable I don't think anything was super memorable. But at the end of the day, they were passable. There were some hits. I don't think they took away from the overall product. So I would sort of just give the commercials a passing score. And again, the broadcast, same thing. And nothing was overly complicated or overly ambitious either. So really, I think the halftime show raises this a bunch. Unfortunately, because it is a game, you still have to consider the game. I'd give the overall Super Bowl an 8.2. That's the spec score. But one thing to keep note of as we go forward, as people start to splinter back into their groups and they get more polarized and they adopt more extreme views and they adopt a very narrow way of forming opinion, I'm really interested in seeing how the NFL keeps this up. Because, again, this is an event that is for everyone. But as a result, I don't really think it belongs to anyone. I'm excited to see if they'll keep it up, but it truly is a great spectacle.